Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. I have not been pushing out a ton of podcast episodes lately. If you have been following me on Facebook and Instagram, you will know that I am opening up an office locally in Blairsville, Georgia. So I have been so excited the past 3 months. I've been so busy on planning everything, getting everything together, putting my office together, and really just kind of going all in while supporting my current and new clients. So bear with me with my podcast episodes because that is taking up so much of my time. I did want to go ahead and put this episode out though, because this is a really fascinating topic, and to me especially is something that I dealt with. And for people that are mineral nerds and holistic health junkies and just love to dive into various topics, you probably have not heard of this unless you are in the mineral and hair analysis world. But I am going to talk about the calcium shell and its impact on women in particular, just because I can speak to women. I am a woman. But this is a very fascinating topic. When I got my first hair test done years ago, I had a calcium shell of 305, I believe. And so I've worked with a handful of clients that have also had calcium shells, copper toxicity. I would say the highest calcium shell that I have seen on one of my clients was like a 720, which if you are a practitioner, you know how wild that is. And so a calcium shell is essentially where there is a shell of calcium that forms outside of the cells. So it basically forms like a wall or a shell outside of the cell, and it blocks minerals from entering the cell to do their job. So magnesium can't get in to do its job. Potassium can't get in to do its job. Sodium can't get in to do its job. I'm going to read a quote from Dr. Rick Malter, who was my mentor in studying minerals and training for the hair analysis test. And he said, as excess copper and calcium increases in the cells and tissues, a calcium shell will build that will tend to block more and more feelings until the person no longer is aware of what is being felt and experienced. Such a person often talks of not feeling anything or being numb and dead emotionally. As the calcium shell builds, a person's perception and awareness diminish. The overall psychological effect of excess copper is a loss of emotional control and awareness, accompanied by diminished feelings and numbness. Pretty interesting, right? So I would say the main groups of women that tend to have a calcium shell are women that have been under a lot of stress for some time, that have experienced trauma in any form, whether it's financial trauma, whether it is sexual abuse, whether it is emotional abuse with a relationship or a boss or something like that. Any sort of trauma. And I've also seen it in the postpartum state as well, birth trauma. If you ever hear women say that they just can't connect with their baby, they just feel like they are just disconnected, their baby came out of the womb, their baby came earthside, and they just feel absolutely nothing to this little baby, they likely have a calcium shell, and they are likely copper toxic. Typically a calcium shell, though, more so than the copper driving that feeling. So this is very interesting, and this can kind of change the game for mental health, not just in America, but all over the world. If people understood minerals and how to interpret a hair test, if they were trained properly to interpret the hair test and provide a protocol to these people, we could literally be changing the game of mental health and then behavioral disorders in kids like by 10 times, if not more, because minerals have everything to do with our mental health. And so it's really interesting because if I'm talking to a potential client and they're describing their symptoms to me, I can kind of put the pieces together of what their hair test will look like. And so many times they will either have a calcium shell or they might have very, very low calcium on the hair test. A person with a calcium shell might feel low in energy, depressed. They might worry a lot. They could be closed off. They feel numb emotionally. They might be stuck in fight or flight. They might have insomnia. They could feel wired but tired at night. They kind of refuse to accept that something is wrong with them. So they might be very led by the ego here and kind of switching into the reptilian brain, which is what some chiropractors like to call that. Something that I have also seen, might ruffle some feathers here, a lot of people that have gotten the COVID vaccine have calcium shells, and this is because it is increasing soft tissue calcification. So if you hear in the news, high school student dropped dead after football practice, high school student dropped dead after science class, 40-year-old woman dropped dead randomly, had a heart attack, heart problems. This is what is happening. And so this is why it's always important to do our research. But I am finding just about every single person that has come to me with a COVID vaccine, whether it's 1 or it's 3 with boosters, just about all of them have a calcium shell. And this is a pretty serious matter because at some point we need magnesium. The heart requires magnesium to get into the cells to do its job for functions that benefit the heart. Look, magnesium is needed for well over 800 functions inside the body, the heart being very much one of them. And similar with calcium, but if that calcium is displaced and it is not in the bones and in the teeth where it belongs, we're going to have some huge issues with our heart, with our ego, with our mind. And this is because calcium is a make things hard mineral. When it is not in the teeth and in the bones, it moves into the soft tissues. It creates that shell. It can harden us physically and emotionally. Some of these people might be very rigid, might be very tight. They might have to see a chiropractor because they can't loosen up, or a massage therapist, or myofascial therapy, craniosacral therapy, things like that. I've also had many reports of husbands coming to me telling me that they need help with their wife, especially postpartum, because she just doesn't care about their marriage. She doesn't care about herself. She feels closed off with their baby. And we can convince her to do a hair test, and we find that there's a calcium shell along with some other things. It is not always just a one thing on the hair test. And this is why I love utilizing this test over blood work, because it is never just that you are going to come back normal on the hair test. A lot of practitioners that are not trained to properly interpret this test might say, well, you look normal, you're in the normal ranges. No, absolutely not. Run, find a new practitioner. If you ever have worked with a doctor or a practitioner that runs your hair test and they tell you that everything looks fine and you look normal, find a new practitioner. Because I promise you, with working with somebody who is trained to interpret the test and understands mineral relationships and ratios, you will not come back normal. You have so much information at your fingertips after doing a hair test that you don't have with regular blood work. In many cases of hypothyroidism, clients have a calcium shell. And this is because calcium is in the soft tissues, like the thyroid, where it does not belong. And it can slow the thyroid down, and it can even cause it to contract. So I have had a handful of clients that have been able to get off thyroid medication like levothyroxine because we are focusing on breaking up that calcium shell, moving calcium back into the teeth and in the bones where it belongs, supporting macrominerals, supporting microminerals, supporting their metabolism, working on light hygiene, hydration, sleep, so many different things to consider here. So it's never just, here's your protocol and have a nice life. We want to make sure that we're retesting. We want to make sure that we are addressing all aspects of the life: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial. Where are there different blocks coming from? What is hardening you? What is causing you to be tight and tense and things like that? So what I have seen in some of my younger clients, let me touch on the kiddos for a second here. If their parents are going through a separation or divorce, if they don't get along with their siblings, if there's a huge age gap and disagreements going on, maybe even bullying at school, they will likely develop a calcium shell. And this is something that, similar with adults too, but I kind of see it more so in kids, that their brain does as a survival mechanism to withdraw from those feelings that they are experiencing in that environment. And in a way, that calcium is trying to prevent them from experiencing it and working through it hands-on. Remember, you can't heal in the environment that destroyed you. So this might kind of seem like a good thing that the brain is, doing this in the body. It's pushing that calcium out of the teeth and in the bones, but it really isn't, because this calcium shell can last for years. It can displace other minerals. It can slow down the thyroid, slow down the metabolism. impact our mental health. So we really want to make sure that anyone that is going through situations like that or even trauma is really focusing on their minerals. Emotional work, yes, absolutely. Therapy, yes, absolutely. But for a lot of times you might hear people say, well, I've done therapy, I've tried various different therapists, and I don't feel any better. This is why. The minerals are the missing piece. For myself, like I said in the beginning of this episode, I had a calcium shell and I had all of the symptoms that I mentioned a few minutes ago, even suicidal at one point. And when I was first introduced to the hair test, found out about my calcium shell and started doing the work to break it up, dumping that excess toxic copper and replenishing my minerals, I had a huge breakdown one night. I remember it very vividly. It was almost kind of scary because it was like the wall was the calcium shell, the wall was just falling and crumbling down right in front of me. And so I also had a huge spiritual awakening with it because my pineal gland was no longer calcified. Your pineal gland has the highest calcification rate compared to any other organs of the body. So it's really no surprise that they flood our foods with synthetic iron, calcium, copper inundated foods will drive up calcification in the body. I always joke with some of my practitioner friends that if someone does something like really stupid or just kind of like, out of left field, I'm always like, well, they're probably overcalcified or they might be copper toxic, and their perception and awareness is severely reduced. But back to the pineal gland, to touch on this, and I will be doing an episode specifically on this topic. And I believe that the episode with Dr. Robert Selig, I believe that we touched on the pineal gland in that episode. I can't remember because that was last year. But I think this is a huge reason as to why some people are easily controlled versus others. Again, topic for a different day because I could go on like an hour-long rant about that. But the hair test can really tell us so much about what's going on with a person's emotions. I do want to point out some different functions of calcium just for the people that are kind of listening to educate themselves here, just so that, because we don't want to demonize calcium. I just don't recommend taking any supplements in isolation without testing first, obviously. So I will list off some functions of calcium, but this is not me saying go out and get a calcium supplement because we never want to do, minerals don't work in isolation. So calcium, like I said before, we want it in the bones and the teeth. It is a hard mineral, structural support, nerve conduction. Calcium regulates the flow of messages in the nervous system, muscle contraction, and heart rhythm. It is required for every heartbeat. Cellular communication, and this is because it acts as a signaling molecule inside the cells. Hormone release and enzyme activity. Blood clotting, buffering and alkalinizing. It neutralizes acidic waste in the body. Emotional regulation, linked to suppression, numbing, and kind of like a shutting down response. And this is because calcium is a sedative mineral as well. So that's something just to kind of keep in mind. If you do have all these symptoms, you might have a calcium shell. I kind of think of calcium as like wearing a heavy coat in the middle of summer sometimes. If you think of it like in terms of the calcium shell, because like I said before, these people are trying to protect themselves. It is keeping you from living your life to the fullest. It's kind of like the body's emotional armor. And calcium is a very masculine mineral versus potassium or magnesium are very feminine minerals. Zinc, masculine mineral. Copper, feminine mineral. So there is kind of like some interesting differences between the minerals because of these masculine and feminine characteristics. So my friend actually made a really good point, kind of like wearing a heavy coat. Like she said that calcium is kind of like a weighted blanket, like put your weighted blanket on, hush, hush, go to sleep, kind of sedation, versus magnesium and potassium. They are more feminine. Like they allow you to feel, they allow you to be flowy, they allow you to like live life and experience life, and they're not necessarily sedative. So again, just another reason why we can't just look at minerals in isolation. One mineral on blood work is not enough to tell us why you are experiencing the symptoms that you are experiencing. I know a lot of people are going to ask, well, how do I break up a calcium shell? Test First of all, we want to make sure that you even have a calcium shell, because if you are taking all of the wrong nutrients, you are probably going to feel a lot worse. Nervous system regulation is another huge thing. A lot of people that I have experienced in my couple of years working as a practitioner want to be handed a protocol similar to the fact that they want to be handed medication and then be told, here you go, hopefully this works for you. This is not how we treat the body from a holistic or a naturopathic perspective, because then we would be missing key parts. You could be on a supplement protocol, but if you are not doing the emotional work, or if you have a spiritual blockage, you're probably not going to feel the full benefits of the mineral balancing. Everything goes hand in hand. So nervous system regulation is something that I think is almost like the last thing that a lot of people want to focus on to get the body out of that fight or flight or that freeze mode. Somatic practices, gentle movement, breath work, community, laughter, getting outside, practicing your light hygiene, supporting your circadian rhythm, all these can be really important here. But a lot of nervous system regulation techniques require us to put in the work and not just take supplements once or twice a day. And so this can be really challenging for some people, especially if they already have a calcium shell. Some people, and this is why I always say for practitioners, it's really important to meet the person where they are at in their healing journey, because what works for one person, breaking up their calcium shell, might not work for another person. In terms of, step 1 or step 2. Sometimes people need to address the emotional trauma first, or some people actually need the nutritional supplement support first, and then they can circle back to the emotional trauma. So this is why it's really important. I ask a ton of questions. My health history form, if you've ever worked with me, is like a couple of pages long, because all of that kind of tells me where you're at in your healing journey and where we should kind of start, like where step 1 is, if that makes sense. I do want to share a case study here with you guys from a calcium shell client. She also had copper toxicity, pretty low sodium and potassium, very, very low level of zinc too. She was in fight or flight. Her adrenals were just pumping out cortisol left and right. She had a magnesium loss pattern, which you might have heard me talk about on here or on my social media before. And this is just essentially where magnesium is being lost from the cells due to stress, copper toxicity. I will point out vitamin D here as well. And vitamin D is something that I'm always very cautious about giving people. We should be getting our vitamin D from the sunlight. But vitamin D can drive up soft tissue calcification. Vitamin D needs magnesium to activate. And so a lot of us are cellularly deficient in magnesium. And so in order for vitamin D to activate, we need that magnesium. We need it to be utilized for calcium regulation as well. And so I probably will make an episode specifically on vitamin D, because there is so much research and so many things to talk about in different areas to kind of go down when it comes to vitamin D. But this is something that I always recommend people to avoid, to be honest. And if you've been on vitamin D for a long time, you might be somebody that's like, nope, you cannot get me off my 10,000 or 30,000 IUs of vitamin D. And it's like, well, just give your body time and you will notice how much better you will feel after it. Vitamin D is also a hormone. Okay, so again, not to go kind of too far down this little rabbit hole here, but that is another topic for another day. But this client had a lot of emotional trauma from when she was a child. She was kind of just told to suppress everything. She had worked with a therapist on and off for years, a couple of different therapists actually, and it just never really helped. It never really addressed a lot of her anxiety, OCD, anger outbursts. One of her therapists suggested that she might have bipolar disorder, and a lot of people in her life said that that made sense because she would have those manic depressive episodes. But, and this might have to be another podcast episode too, because I could do a full episode on bipolar disorder and copper toxicity, Bipolar disorder is actually a result of copper toxicity. And when we have that calcium shell with it, this is kind of a recipe for disaster. Now, this woman did not get the COVID vaccine. She had not had a vaccine since her childhood vaccines. Just something to point out there. But her nutrition was all over the place. Sugar cravings, very bad. Light hygiene wasn't the best. Hydration was pretty good. She was pretty good about drinking water. She would add lemons, limes, fruit, cucumbers, pinch of salt, Redmond salt to her water. So she was pretty good on the hydration side of things. Nutrition could have been better. She would eat, if she ate breakfast, it might have been like a pastry or a donut or something sweet. So spiking the blood sugar, which wasn't helping. Or it might have been like 1 or 2 eggs, which we know for women, 1 or 2 eggs are not enough to start your day out. You need at least 20 to 30 grams of protein. So that was definitely not cutting it. She was not getting enough protein in daily. We did her hair test. She wanted to conceive. Actually, her and her partner wanted to conceive. They had been trying to conceive for a couple of years and they had no luck. And she was kind of at the point of, I know that I want to have a kid, but I don't want to go the IVF route. And that's what her doctors were kind of pushing her to do. And so she was kind of starting to have like this back and forth with herself of like, well, should I do this? Should I do that? And so her husband and her actually decided that they were going to go the holistic route and try to see like what is actually causing this. Maybe I can figure out, why why my therapist suspected bipolar disorder, why I have these manic depressive episodes, why I am nauseous and anxiety, OCD, things like that. So we ran her hair test. She had a calcium shell, one of the highest calcium shells that I've ever seen before. Like I said, low zinc, copper toxicity. And now with her copper wasn't super elevated. It wasn't crazy high. And so reading that at face value, if we were to just have looked at that, it might look to somebody, well, you have high calcium, so that's good. Or you have high magnesium, that's good. You have low zinc, so you might need more zinc. You might need to supplement with 15 to 30 milligrams of zinc. And your copper is not too low, not too high. Maybe you might want to supplement with some beef liver because everyone in the ancestral, pro-metabolic, carnivore, animal-based community says that beef liver is really, really good for you. It's a superfood. And so this is why we can't read this test at face value. Because if we were to go off of those assumptions alone, this client would have felt a lot worse. And who knows where her mental health would have been. Just something to think about. So, calcium shell, magnesium loss pattern, adrenals, high sodium potassium ratio, which is our Na to K ratio. This is our stress ratio. Some practitioners call it the life or death ratio. Very crucial to our overall health and wellness, our cells. Copper toxicity, low zinc, blood sugar dysregulation. We had a lot to work on with this client. And so something that I think some people might not love is that I am a very blunt person. And I will tell you straight up, if I think that you need to spend 1 year, 2 years, 3 years prepping for conception, spending time with your body, spending time with your husband, getting to know your body on a level that is different from what you've been experiencing before. Because when you have a calcium shell in particular, you are numb to yourself and you might not truly understand who you are, what you like, what you don't like. You're kind of in a way having a funeral for the old you to make room for this new you that is about to blossom. Copper toxicity also. Copper toxicity, when you are actively dumping copper, and we can see that on the hair test. If you are an overt copper toxicity, so your hair test shows that your copper level is high, you're probably copper dumping. This can also be a sign of trauma dumping. So when this client was coming to me, she was actively working through and going back and forth, IVF. I need to figure out what's really going on with me. She was starting to address all of this stuff, and it was coming up in her mineral profile. How freaking cool is that? And so we spent 8 months working on breaking up her calcium shell, detoxing that excess toxic copper, starting to bring more regulation to her nervous system, her cells, working on going outside more. She worked for herself, so she was able to spend as much time as she wanted outside. She did not have to be in fluorescent lighting. We worked on her circadian rhythm, no fluorescent lights at night, candles, circadian rhythm light bulbs, blue light blocking glasses. Raw optics are my favorite. You can use code LivelyRooted if you order a pair. I highly recommend them, especially their sunset lens. We worked on cleaning up her diet and nutrition, blood sugar balancing. I even recommended her to wear a continuous glucose monitor just because a lot of issues that stem from difficulty conceiving can be due to blood sugar imbalances. The more insulin spikes we have, studies have found the greater chances of infertility or difficulty getting pregnant we could experience. And so we kind of did all the things. We covered all the bases. She continued working with her therapist. She stayed on her mineral balancing protocol. Her husband actually got his minerals test done too. And so within 12 months, she was actually able to get pregnant. And so that's what's really crazy is, not crazy, but when we spend time giving the body what it actually needs, a lot of time what people are doing, we are on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Pinterest, we're on Google, we're Googling our symptoms. We might be even asking, we might be at a desperate point of asking ChatGPT or AI about our symptoms and what can I do and what is this, and getting all these random diagnoses from Facebook groups and from people and influencers that might have had the same things, and they're giving out their blind recommendations, and we're trying this and we're trying that. We're spending all this money on random supplements. And then when we do the functional testing, we see exactly what is wrong with the body. We see exactly what the body needs to heal. Because if you've been following me, if you've read on my website, my social media, what I believe is that God has given us everything that we need to heal on this earth. He has given us bodily autonomy. He has given us authority over our own bodies. He has given us that right to utilize others in our community to help us achieve that higher level of consciousness and activation of various different emotions and blockages that we might be experiencing, for others to hold us accountability. I mean, scripture tells us that community is so important. And this is one of the reasons that it was a lot of prayers and a lot of nights up talking to God about my business to be moved from a virtual setting into a local setting. And I'm of course still going to take on my virtual clients. That is not going to change. But cultivating this community and building your own village for other like-minded people who have been hurt by the medical community, been hurt by doctors. And then for her to get pregnant in a year, which some people, it might take a little bit longer. For some people, it might have only taken 4 or 5 months. I've worked with clients that they've been trying to get pregnant for years. They work with me. We give them their protocol. We run their functional tests. We clean up, their diet and lifestyle practices, light hygiene, things like that. And they get pregnant within 5 months. So the fertility conversation for this podcast in particular is just beginning because there's so much more that I could talk about when it comes to preconception, fertility, postpartum, pregnancy, just birth work in general. And so allowing us to test, to understand what the body truly needs on that deeper cellular level, we're finally giving it back what it has been craving for and calling out for years. Sugar cravings, low stomach acid, constipation, bloating. belching, acid reflux, mental health symptoms, anxiety, OCD, anger outbursts. Those were all cries out for help for nutrients, specific nutrients that she needed. And so this is why I'm always somebody that I always recommend that we test. With my clients, I always start with a minerals test. Now, we might need a gut test, which is a stool test, a GI map. We might need an oat test. We might need a Dutch hormones test. We might need a bioresonance scan. We might need a mold test, mycotoxins test. But for everybody that comes to me with any sort of symptoms, my requirement is at minimum a hair test. Because if I don't see what's going on inside of your body, then I'm making a guess. And that's pretty unethical, in my opinion. Not when I have access to a wonderful lab, two wonderful labs actually, to gather all of this information about what your body is trying to tell you. We just have to listen. This is why I scream from the rooftops functional testing over anything. Because if this woman were to have gone IVF route, IVF might have failed her. And can you imagine the damage that does to hundreds, millions of women per year when IVF fails them, and all they have this desire to get pregnant. They have this desire to be a mom, and IVF fails them. And the way that we have to think about it is, if you have, this is what I believe, if you have that deep down desire, you have to figure out what is causing these symptoms and this blockage to get pregnant in the first place. It could be gut dysbiosis, it could be mold toxicity, it could be mineral imbalances, it could be a calcium shell, copper toxicity, but we don't know until we test. And then also, that sets you up for pregnancy and postpartum. A lot of women have postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, even postpartum psychosis. And that will directly impact their baby, because babies follow mom's nervous system. This could look like latching issues, constipation, poor sleep. And so it all starts with us, right? And so, not to shame anybody, not to point out blame or make anybody feel bad about themselves, but it's your ability, your God-given right to take back power and ownership of your health. So I could definitely keep going on and on about this tangent. I do have a calcium shell page on my website. For those of you that might want to read a little bit more about that, I am working to slowly update my website just with more information, blog posts, things like that. I am trying to be pretty active about posting blogs about like 2 to 3 times a month on there, various topics, things like that. So if you have experienced a calcium shell, reach out to me and let me know. I love to hear your guys' experience. I love to connect with you. I want to talk and have these conversations. If you think that you might have one based on your symptoms and the stories that I described in this episode, again, reach out. Don't be a stranger. I always try to tell people, like, please don't think that I'm just somebody on the internet that just wants to give you information. Like, let's have a conversation. Like, let's email back and forth. You can send me a text message. My number is on my website. You can book a discovery call with me if you think that you might have a calcium shell or copper toxicity or something going on that is preventing you from achieving the life that you want to live. I will leave the link in my show notes for a discovery call. If you are local to Blairsville, Georgia, definitely go like my Facebook page, Lively Rooted Family Wellness Center. I'll be posting more updates. I am going to do a giveaway basket. I have so many wonderful brands. Raw Optics has sent me 2 lenses for my giveaway basket. Seeking Health, St. James Iced Tea, Body bio, I have so many brands sitting in my guest bedroom right now for my giveaway basket. So I'm going to be posting details to enter that very soon. I definitely don't want to leave out my virtual clients or any of my followers virtually. So there will be a giveaway specifically for you guys as well. So local giveaway and my virtual giveaway. So more details will come out over that. So make sure that you are following me on social media. And if you have questions, like I said before, don't be a stranger. Let's have these conversations, because the only way that we are going to change the world is if we are talking about this and we are having these conversations and connections and connecting the dots and sharing this within our community, whether it be local or online.